Welcome to another wonderful webinar, and I'm excited to have you all here. The topic is very dear to my heart, and I bet it's for you as well. Many of you have given us wonderful feedback about last several webinars, and this topic kept coming up, and I thought, why not bring on a fabulous friend of mine and a colleague and someone I respect and love for her work. So welcome Dr. Deborah Collins, and she and I will be presenting. So let's begin. So for starters, yes, I hope all of us agree that all learning is social and emotional. And in order to set the stage for this conversation, I thought I'll share a beautiful video which will tell us what we need to know. So let's play this. Okay, all right.
They asked us to pick a student
that we really believe in. I picked you, and I chose you.
And I chose you.
I chose you because every day you have an infectious smile and you always have the greatest attitude.
I knew that you were my student. You were the reason that I come to work every day, every single day.
Because you're so passionate, it just brightens my day every day to know that I get to see you.
And I picked you because I wanted to tell you how much you inspire me every day. Every day you smile, and you make me so happy.
Thank you.
You inspire me to be better.
And you're very special to me.
We were asked to think of a student that we believed in. And Dakota, what I believe about you is that you are amazing, that you have overcome some hard things in your life, and you overcome them with a smile.
I chose you.
I love you to death. I've loved having you in class all last year.
He wanted us to pick someone who we believe in and why we come to work every day, because it's not for the money. And I chose you.
So very proud of the direction that you're going in, and I just think that you have endless possibilities ahead of you.
Our whole class looks to you to make us laugh every single day.
And I just wanted to let you know that I believe in you. You can do anything you put your mind to, and you have a bright future ahead of you, so I chose you.
I believe in you. I love you. I think you guys are the absolute best thing ever. So I want you to know that I believe in you.
All right, if this did not tug on your heart, then I don't know what will. And this is exactly the reason we are in this business of working with children, helping them, making their lives better. But in return, what we get is unmeasurable. And welcome, Deborah. I'm so delighted to have you. We have Dr. Deborah Collins, who is whose career has been in school psychology, and she's a champion of children's well-being, and she has developed, co-founded and co-created a Stop and Relax curriculum, bringing yoga, mindfulness into schools. And I'm so happy to just present this topic. So let me start with my first question for you, that why do you see social emotional learning as fundamental as knowing one's ABCs?
Mm-hmm. Well, as a school psychologist and working with child development and having worked with children from preschool up through high school, we know that children are social emotional beings well before they come to school. And here I think I would recommend that people look into the research of Adele Diamond. She has some wonderful articles about evidence-based research on what shows what really improves school outcomes for children and emphasizes addressing the whole child not just content, not just academic content. To quote her, she says, if you want to help children with academic development, you will not realize the best results if you focus only on academic development. The most efficient and effective strategy for advancing academic achievement is to also nurture children's social, emotional, and their physical needs. And then she, in that article, says that this conclusion is counterintuitive. And personally, I have to say, why would it be counterintuitive? I can't imagine that anyone would think that you would get the most learning, academic learning out of children by working directly on academics, narrowly on academics, and ignoring their social emotional well-being. Learning how to engage cooperatively with others, and learning how to keep calm in the face of challenging and unexpected and non-preferred events and activities are major accomplishments that provide the foundation for children to engage in academic instruction. In fact, unless they feel safe and secure emotionally, their brains and minds will not engage. And academic learning, if we look at it that way, is kind of a luxury that children can't indulge in until they feel socially and emotionally secure and supported.
And I think what's so striking to me about this is the emphasis on the child as a whole, fully functioning human being. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate that perspective because often, particularly you and I work with children when they're struggling and when they're brought into our offices or in our classrooms or taken outside of the classroom, there's a general feeling of the urgency to fix it, whatever that it might be. And we may be actually missing the point and looking at the little tiny human being who needs this nurturing, compassionate, supportive attitude and treatment, which can really make all the difference. So I really appreciate that.
Which is why I love the title of that slide, that social emotional learning is as fundamental as ABC. So when, in your perspective, with the focus on executive function in particular, how would you describe the relationship between social emotional learning and executive function?
Well, so many thoughts come to my mind when we think about social emotional learning, and it was quite surprising to me to hear that in the context of education, there's a big push to talk about social emotional learning, but not really mentioning executive function. To me, even the underneath the ABC is the B, and so or k sound, I mean, as fundamental as that. And this is an interesting, the Economist, their intelligence unit did this global survey of 762 educators from 15 countries. And 80% of the educators believe positive emotions are critical for academic success. Emotional well-being is crucial for development of fundamental literacies and communication skills. Mm-hmm. So that's a very high number, 80%. And I bet this number was very low, Deborah, 50 years ago. I think people would have thought, it's too weak. If you're paying attention to child weeping or complaining, it's a waste of our time to pay attention to that. Let's work on mathematics. There's some more detailed deep dive here. I thought that was also interesting to share with our audience today, that take a look at 93% of educators amongst this group actually believe that they have social learning focus in classroom. Mm-hmm. So I'm very interested to find out what that looks like, because it's like onion. You can peel the layers and you can deepen that process a little bit more. Take another, the 82% think extracurricular activities have positive effect on well-being. Mm-hmm. And 83% think that supportive home environment impacts emotional well-being. So all in all, I think there is a consensus now. We can clearly say that social emotional aspects of child's growth and development needs to be a forefront of teaching process. Yes. And cannot be sidelined. So now I want to weave that into many people, when I present, I always talk about this framework of 3 foundational core executive function skills: impulse control, working memory, and cognitive and affective flexibility. Just to tie that into the context of social emotional well-being, though, is that you need working memory to effectively process and keep track of multiple influx of affective information. So if the Zoom doesn't work, then I'm feeling a little anxious. That's going to influence the way I speak. If you say something and if I interrupted you, I need to be mindful that next time to let you finish completely. So we're keeping information in working memory in order to take good decisions or hold back, hang back. So that's one important thing a working memory plays a role. Inhibition is to delay personal gratification. Temper emotional responses, instead work collaboratively in the social context to help people achieve their goals while you're achieving your goals. And this to me is such a profoundly important process where executive function skills need to be brought on board. If I'm having a meltdown, I am so consumed by my meltdown that I'm not even at all paying attention to teachers' teaching got disrupted, or the kid next to me who actually had a question that the teacher was about to answer that did not get answered. Or there were 3 kids who were waiting to go to the nurse's office because they had something urgent to take care of. So that kind of consumption of emotional response can really interfere with your social emotional progress, because that requires great amount of inhibition. And lastly, of course, that affective and cognitive flexibility really comes into play when you have to think about strategies that when you're going through personal hardship, that you have to resolve interpersonal conflicts, because you can succeed by standing on the corpse of someone else. That sounds gross, but what I mean by you can achieve success, and it can come at a cost of your selfishness when you made somebody else lose. But if you develop this wonderful acumen, you can understand you can win while other people win as well. Yeah. I'm going to bring this wonderful framework that I thought was extremely helpful to understand these superficial cognitive skills that are executive function skills that are more simplistic in nature, and then there are complex executive function skills. And sorry for such a busy slide. This is a model that was created by this group who produced a report on executive function mapping project. But if you look at this complex skills, they're talking about the cognitive domain, including planning, problem solving, goal setting. And then you have emotional domain. That's what allows you to be persistent, have grit, and deploy your emotional regulation. And the two intersect in such a way that you have to demonstrate flexibility, focus, and inhibition in order to respond appropriately to this multi-component, dynamic process of engaging with the world as a whole. So all I want to say that I want to quickly go to this slide, which I don't know if I can get to this slide. Skip, and I want to get to the this slide, so give me a second. But one thing here to really understand that it is an umbrella term. Executive function is an umbrella term which is supervising and watching orchestration of many skills. So I will end by saying that children are social emotional beings, and you cannot improve social emotional competence without directly and specifically addressing underlying executive function skills.
I definitely agree with that.
So that brings me to the next question I have for you. Can you give us some examples of how a social emotional learning perspective affects the interpretation of and intervention for problems referred to you? And please tell me when to move the slide.
That's a meaty question. So let's start with just as a school psychologist, students are referred to school psychologists like me because they are presenting with learning and or behavioral difficulties. And generally because whatever has been attempted so far to address those difficulties isn't working. And so my job is to do some diagnostics and some close assessment to find out the source of that difficulty. What is the reason this is happening? Where is the root of it? So if you go on to the next slide, what is typical is that the first thing is assuming that the student is socially and emotionally competent. I mean, that's what's going to be assumed before the child's referred to me. And with that assumption, if the child is not engaging like this one looks like, shutting down a bit, then it's likely that a teacher will conclude the child is being purposefully difficult, that it's a motivational problem of apathy or opposition, or laziness. But really, I have to look at that, because that assumption tells us that the student could do better, but does not care to. And then the interventions are going to assume that the student could do better, so we just have to get the student to do better. And usually what we do is we keep prompting and coaxing or demanding that the child do better, or we provide incentives. You know, when you get this much done, then you will receive some free time or something like that. So those interventions are based on the assumption that the child has these skills to do what is needed to do academically. My evaluation, though, often reveals that due to some situation or disability or a combination of factors, the child actually lacks a foundation of social emotional security and skills, and therefore really cannot do better. The child cannot engage productively at a certain point. And those behaviors are communicating to us that maybe we have to look for trauma or instability in that child's life, or an actual disorder such as attention deficit hyperactivity or autism spectrum disorders, factors that will cause the child to have emotional turmoil, attention difficulties, misperceive social situations, often as being, somehow threatening or risky when they're not. The child is likely to lack coping difficulties, and at a certain point of stress has these instantaneous escape or avoidance or protest reactions. And that's why they're not engaging, and that's why those behaviors keep happening. Then it changes the whole approach we're going to have to intervention. So that might be on the next slide. If they don't have those competencies, then we have to make accommodations. We have to say, well, I can't assume that this child can handle this much work. I have to say, break it down into manageable pieces, or I have to have a peer buddy, or I have to have the student near my desk so I can notice before they get overstressed, I can intervene. And I also have to directly intervene to build that child's competencies, help the child learn how to calm down before the stress causes those reactions, those explosive or oppositional reactions, or the shutting down. And that's a different approach. We're building skills or scaffolding and supporting the development of skills rather than assuming they're already there.
You know what's so very important, a thing you touched upon, that when we see difficulties, the end goal is to get the learning to happen. We never keep end goal is for a child to learn how to become this Zen-like person who can tolerate all the life's challenges with same equanimity, like same kind of attitude of curiosity, and yet incredible problem-solving mode. So if we don't bring child's attention to that future goal, they may be thinking that it's just the teacher is only helping me calm down because I can get through the math work, or I just need to chill out or not be rude and disruptive because we're on the playground and we have to take turns. But no, what we are saying that this needs to be done throughout your life, my dear child, for all circumstances, not for just particular one circumstance. Yeah, I really like that point that you're making.
It's true, and especially when children can do better and they can keep their equilibrium, then, like I said, then the doors open to participating in the learning.
Yes.
And they want to. they want to, you know, by and large, they want to, and they're going to do better and enjoy it. And that's exactly right. This is the foundation for the learning.
Yeah, I very much appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about these lapsing into shutting down behaviors or protesting and escape behaviors, what do you see as the role of stress in causing emotional dysregulation and the strategies we need to help students manage these emotional responses and reactions?
Thank you for that question. It's such a wonderful question, because I have given a lot of thought to stress and its impact on learning, and then contextualizing social emotional learning from that point of view. And I thought, well, you know, Robert Sapolsky's work has had great influence on my thoughts about how to conceptualize and the parallel that he sees in primates and humans, particularly in the 20th century or 21st century human trying to accomplish and keep life going. So the first thing is, you know, stress once was helpful, but now it's become a handicap. So yes. Stress 200,000 years ago was an essential way to judge threat and requiring immediate and very, very prompt motor response. Nothing, there is no lion or tiger hiding in the bushes that's charging at us. Second thing is the flight or fight response, and two workhorses of stress responses include the adrenaline and the glucocorticoid. Glucocorticoid. And yes. One thing that's interesting to me about these are released because that's what fuels this act of incredible, powerful response. Right. And the next thing about that is stress response is literally was supposed to come on board when there was a crisis. That crisis required you to take yourself to a safer place. And when the crisis went away, all the stress response went away. Now, post-crisis, this bringing your own body, mind, and your heart and your soul even to that state of equilibrium, it was an essential part of coming to the other side after stress. Yes. All that has gone away in modern life. So the modern trace is psychological and never stops. So this constant state of high level of alert, high level of vigilance, and high level of desire to react or respond to the threat that you feel. And if we quickly talk about the threat, what is the threat we are feeling? The three important threats that psychologists often talk about, one is fear of death, but let's say maybe in the pandemic, the death has become quite vivid and in our conversations. But second is the fear or the stress of being excluded from social environment. Mm-hmm. And the third stress is the stress of not knowing, the uncertainty of life. Mm-hmm. So now the uncertainty, the ostracizing, being ostracized, and death are the three fears that have replaced the lion and tiger in the bushes. Mm-hmm. So I like to kind of think about this, the right amount of stress versus the wrong amount of stress, particularly unending stress. So one is that the right amount of stress can activate, it can help you take charge, it can actually, you're bored and suddenly you can be alerted. This woman is taking a test, as you can see, the painting that was done in 14th century. But anyways, I think the idea there is how can I have an exam? So the night before that cramming that we do, is a response to stress that can be appropriate because then you're not taking an exam for next consecutive months. Mm-hmm. The unending amount of stress is the overbooked children, the assignments that never end. And now in a pandemic, we are thinking about the virtual learning versus non-virtual learning versus hybrid learning. So we don't have demarcations like the bell rings and the class is over. You finish the homework is over. You always have extra assignment if you want to impress the teacher or if you want to get extra credit. So those kinds of things is really that worries me about stress. And lastly, I will kind of like to tie this back into that stress because stress is omnipresent, it is a teachable skill for children to know how to manage their emotions. And I love this quote that I found is, if a child can't read, we teach him how to read. If a child can't do math, we teach the math. But when the child doesn't know how to behave, we punish them. And this to me is a truly not understanding the structure. So if you don't mind, I'll quickly go through some strategies I thought. So how to present some student-centered strategies. So here, like I thought, and there's so many strategies, so many ways to kind of slice this problem, but I thought I'll target 6 prominent strategies that to me are very meaningful and urgent as we're getting ready to see the schools open. So the first strategy, let's do, is help children devise goals. And here's a very important thing to bring in executive function, the goal-directed behaviors. That means this is what I'm doing in order to achieve this. And if that, what you're trying to achieve is unclear, then the goal is to really, let's say if I don't get to pick the book or check out the book from the library, and then I'm going to throw a tantrum because my goal was to check out that book. But if my goal is to really have a great time at the library, then I may get to check out the book, or I may not get to check out the book. Is a great way to kind of separate the goals of immediate gratification to the future-oriented thought process.
And build flexibility.
Sorry, say that again?
And build flexibility.
And build flexibility as you're managing goals. And those who watched my webinar with Lynn Meltzer, we talked a lot about goal management techniques. So please feel free to visit that webinar, the previous webinar. But most important thing is goals allow to facilitate accomplishment and help propel one's progress forward. And the trick though is that in the younger years, the teachers are crafting the goals for the students, or even in older years, but it's like passing the baton. We have to teach children to craft their own goals. The next idea I thought is this idea of experience reframing. We are always concerned that the child is not having a good day, and the child gets a sticker and child gets this feedback. I really think it can set the stage for feeling bad about having a bad day. And it's really important to recognize that having a particular day is simply like having a particular type of weather. And I use this framework for working with younger children, that, well, how about rainbow days? So me, I am made of this, I'm a weather channel, and I go through all these emotions, by the way. And then I can take a card home showing my family, I had a rainbow day today, but no, today was a cloudy day. Now this builds some sense of reality, which says all days are welcome. And you can also allow the student to actually have a stormy day, which requires more than an umbrella. And I like this kind of framing the problem differently. I will tell you what another way I like to frame, and I have my little sloth here. Another way to experience framing example would be for younger children, you can talk about the teddy bear days. I'm feeling feel like getting a hug, or I'm open to hugs. I'm feeling absolutely chilled and I have no problems. But then kitty cat days, as you know, the cats just don't like to be touched. They don't want to be left alone. And then sloth days, I'm a little slow, I'm not getting work done. And then porcupine days, I'm getting angry, I'm getting upset. It's also a great way to externalize the language of expressing emotions.
That's what I was noticing, yes. So the child doesn't keep thinking, I'm bad. It's me, it's internal to me that I'm a bad person, I'm not lovable.
Yeah, and again, we are living in a pandemic, so I modified this activity to show actually images, and the teacher can actually share that image with the parents, and they can make little flashcards, so the child can actually, at the beginning of the class, teacher can say, show me, how are you feeling today? So I'm having a rainy day, or I'm having a porcupine day. It's a great way for teacher to take the temperature of the class, but also set the expectation that the child is allowed to have whichever day he is going through, because that's what it means to be a human. Another little strategy I thought is a really powerful way is the choice-making process. And I have some great, so this is something, I have modified this, but you can make a paper flower, and each petal has choice that the students can say, I can cool off with. So this is a next step, which is first is expressing how you feel. Next is what will you do about it. And so you can say, so let me show you how this will be enacted. So this is how it will look in the classroom. And so having a giant bear in the class, so the student can say, I'm feeling a little upset, I'm going to give Mr. Bear a hug. So that autonomy and freedom is one of the ways to introduce self-control and giving agency to the child. I love this concept of igloo. This is literally a project I've seen some schools make with their students, and this igloo, you can put some lighting inside, and the child just says, I'm going to cool off in my igloo. So the child gets an opportunity to separate himself or herself. But again, that idea of agency is so very important. And the last activity can be done with a little bit older kids. And I like to do this when I do groups, but you have like take different color papers, you tear them into pieces, and you always have these 3 lines drawn. And now your job is, I'm going to cool off until I do one strand of the rainbow. So you take the glue, you take the pieces, and you stick it. It's not perfect. It is something to do. Another very important point here to remember is to involve your motor system. Because conceptually understanding cooling off needs to be brought back to the body. Body is one of the strongest tools we have to regulate and introduce regulation through body. There's some other ideas that I also have that I use for effective self-assessment is to use the tier to describe competence. And this is again, performance competence, task competence. It can be relationship competence, but the level of expertise can be, I'm a jogger. I like the framework because it is showing moving forward. So everybody has an opportunity to move forward from wherever they are. A jogger is also reaching a destination, but a skateboarder is getting there faster. And the driver is getting there even faster, and the pilot, boom, pilot can arrive and cover long distance. So this idea of using some representation, which is also that metaphoric aspect of critical and higher order thinking, can be very effective. And so I suggest, or I do this in my sessions with clients, as well as in my ExQ software. I have embedded this idea of claiming what level of competency you have in a given task. So you can say, I can do this. So in math, I'm a skateboarder because I can do this. And the reason I'm not a pilot is because I can't do this. So you can recognize that in order to move from a skateboarder to a pilot, there's a competency gap, and you can introduce that. So this is another clever way of looking at self-awareness and self-assessment. Another quick framework for even older kids is talking about the language of novice, apprentice, practitioner, and expert. And it just is the same language, more refined, and again, getting the child to stamp on the top of the assignment. So having the student turn in the assignment by claiming their competence is really, really important way to connect performance with the self-appraisal, because ultimately it's the self-appraisal that's going to act as a motivator for self-change. And 2 more quick strategies. Number 5 is self-advocacy. There's many shades of self-advocacy. So I won't go through all of them, but paraphrasing the expectations, asking for clarification, speaking on behalf of yourself. I am so sorry, but this is a little bit difficult assignment for me. Is there any way you can help me to simplify this? Or is it allowable if I watch a movie because I'm traveling for sports and I want to have a chance to read the book? That kind of speaking on behalf of yourself, and then standing up for yourself. That is a little bit different, which is defending your actions in an enlightened self-interest way, not a selfish way. And lastly, looking out for yourself, protecting your rights, protecting your responsibilities, protecting the harm other people's words may cause you. This is a little bit harder, particularly when teacher has the power and the child doesn't, or parent has the power. How do we empower the children to take that ownership? This is called the helping curriculum. I really like these ideas of, did you offer help today? Did you ask for help today? Did you accept help today? Or did you politely decline help? Because you said, I'll do it by myself. I love this kind of asking that the children can be doing because teachers prompt them to do that. And the last strategy I feel in order to imbibe social emotional learning is the kindness ambassadors. Several schools I've been following that have done program of leadership development and talking to the kids of becoming They call it leadership program, but I like this is my term, kindness ambassadors, where the children have been charged to be seeking for those who need greater help than they need. And so stopping, this one particular school had this program where the children, these girls would walk in the cafeteria and spot these children or their peers who were sitting by themselves and say, hey, would you like company today? And then sitting with them and eating lunch. So that kind of looking out for lonely and misunderstood children, offering help voluntarily without being, I see that I work with a lot of children with Asperger's, autism, and ADHD, and I'm always looking for kindness ambassadors from the school. So when I reach to the school psychologist, I say, I need one kindness ambassador who won't mind taking the time, even though associating with this impulsive kid is going to make his social capital decline a little bit. So that's what I wanted to share, like these breadth of strategies.
Right.
We don't have adequate time, but I wanted to cover that.
Well, I like that what I see to pull it together is that you're offering nomenclature, labels that point at like signposts to various options for gradually empowering a child, increasingly empowering them as they're able to take on more and more. And I want to clarify, like with the stormy days and rainy days, I hope that people don't interpret that as being, well, the child has permission to just be stormy all the time.
Yes.
A stormy day, anybody can have a stormy day, but you're helping to give it a way of talking about it, that it leads to, well, what can I now do about it? It doesn't mean I'm a bad person, I'm doomed. Because what we want to do is, we don't want people to be stuck, and we don't want children to be stuck. When they are stuck, that's when the stress is there. They don't know how to get unstuck. And all of these strategies are ways to help someone who's stuck in a bad place free themselves up and move forward.
And I really appreciate you clarifying that, because the strategy of whether we are talking about the stormy days or weather comparison or animal state, it cannot work independently. It has to work with the next step.
Yes.
It's giving choices. Because if you don't introduce choice making, then the child is going to go home and voila, I'm a stormy kind of guy, and he's never going to kind of come to this next level of preparedness or personal progress. Exactly. So they're linked together. So that brings me to this question that, can you describe some methods and programs that promote social emotional learning and the challenges to implement them in schools? Because it's not easy.
No, it's not easy, but it's so fulfilling. And the first thing I want to mention is the teachers, a big way to build children's SEL is for teachers to take care of their own.
So true.
Their own equilibrium, because children will mirror the teacher's energy. If a teacher who takes good care of themselves and their own stress, because I don't have to take the time for the teachers who are listening, without me telling you, and we know the things that are, just piled and piled and piled upon you. It's very stressful, and even more so now that we have to translate teaching into virtual options and so forth. Developing your own strong self-calming skills is paramount, because you need to be leading the children forward. Therefore, you have to be a step ahead yourself. And here are just some programs: Brave Over Perfect, which is related to also the sweet spot. These can be Googled or looked up, or I think we have a list of resources to offer.
We'll give them, yeah.
And Mindful Leader. These are programs that teachers can access for ways to help, again, not trying to be perfect, that's liberating, and that helps keep you calm. Getting things done without being perfect, and developing mindfulness. So teachers can do a lot just within themselves. Then working directly with students. Two of the simplest things to do, I've highlighted here. One is breath work. As you said, Sucheta, the stress is physiological. There are chemicals going through the body, tightening the muscles, affecting the circulation. We have to start with the body to bring stress down. And calming breathing is the most portable skill. There are so many options online to learn different kinds of calming breaths. Some examples are ha breaths. I've said here, a ha breath for you listening is a sigh of relief, where you lift your shoulders up when you breathe in and then go and let all that stress drop off. And you do 3 of those and you already feel better. And it's easy for children to do. Counting breaths, breathing into a count of 4, out to a count of 4. Easy to do. Do it a few times a day with the students. It's good for all of you. And it's very accessible even to students that you can't really talk to about concepts of stress or self-calming. It just happens. Positive practice, number 2 there, are actual activities you can do to practice good social skills. And we're going to have an addendum to this workshop with 2 lessons. One is called To Be Kind, and another is called Positives for All, which are activities showing children how to give compliments, how to practice wishing others well, being there for each other, and turning around a bad situation to a good situation. And actually some directed practice in this. Rather than always just saying stop and leaving them at stop, we didn't like that, but well, what could we do that would be better than that, that would lift us up? Okay, going back to the wind beneath our wings, that's what
and that immediate support, like it's not like in now next 30 years you can learn to do this. No, let's practice this right away.
Let's practice it now. And the main thing here is that to remember that when stress is heavy, reasoning is low. When a child shuts down, or especially when a child starts being actively oppositional, it's very unpleasant because from a teacher's perspective, the class is being hijacked and taken off the track. But the child's own nervous system has been hijacked. Their stress is so high that their ability to reason and be flexible is low. They are showing you that they're stuck in a bad place and don't know how to get out. Reasoning is optimal when stress is low. So if you infuse the classroom with just regular breathing and positive practices, it's going to help establish a level of equanimity in the classroom that is beneficial for everybody.
Love that.
And here we have a list of all kinds of programs that, again, you can have this list, look at it, go on Google and find out what it's about. These points weren't organized in any particular sequence. You'll find, as it says on the slide, these options or resources range from things that a teacher can use individually with 1 or more students, or programs that are so sophisticated that they can be implemented on a school-wide basis. And you can be eclectic, you can pick and choose, go find something that resonates with you and your students, and see if you can bring that into your work as well.
Love that.
About the obstacles, though. Oh, I forgot. Almost. Thank you for this slide.
Yes, I wanted to put this slide so you will talk about your own program and share with us how we can think about it.
But okay, it's not just my program. The Stop and Relax that Sucheta mentioned I was involved with is a program of self-calming that's yoga-based, and I developed it in collaboration with 2 special educators and a yoga therapist some years ago. And the reason was all the programs on the last slide. We were working with children with conditions like autism spectrum disorders that really impair communication, cognitive flexibility, social interaction, those executive functions of organizing and sequencing toward a goal, self-regulation. And for these children, everyday events will trigger those reactions, those stress reactions where they escape or they protest. And it could happen many times a day. And what we found was that, you know, when they're prompted to relax, calm, and we're trying to reassure them, you know, chill out, relax, it's okay. They may never have truly relaxed because their nervous systems are under such extreme constant stress, and they're so vigilant for things that they experience as threatening or disruptive. So when we looked at a lot of the other programs, we found that they required so much concept development and being able to talk about concepts like relaxation, that we had to go into the physical level, as you mentioned, Sucheta, and work from things that were much more accessible, breathing and muscle relaxation. Those were things that these children could much more directly enter and experience with the right guidance. So we want to credit that we built a lot on the work of the Teach Autism program to create the kind of structure and visual cues that would decrease the restricted, the stimming behaviors, the behavior problems, and improve these children's self-regulation. Again, why? Because that way they can engage in learning. And otherwise, they're not able to. They've been hijacked. There's that obstacle we have to remove. And in this case, we had to give them a skill of relaxation that did not exist for them. So for those teachers who are working with those kind of populations, I can say that this might be what you need to work with students. You can't just talk about what it means to relax or have them identify and rate their emotions or their levels of stress. This is more direct. Thank you. The obstacles, you know, for a teacher in a classroom, the only obstacle would be yourself. If you are motivated to do some breathing with your class every day and integrate some of these kindness ambassador strategies, positive practices, self-calming areas like the igloo, things like that, there's a lot that you can do to infuse your work with things that will support your students' social and emotional stability and ability to be flexible. But at the school level, things are, you know, financial. Many of the school-based initiatives require money for, at a minimum, materials, and of course more for training, and that can be an obstacle. But I think the biggest obstacle is a philosophy of what's important in education. And yes. I'm glad to see that there's a lot of impetus to move from the philosophy or the outlook that the academics are the be-all and end-all, and instead to look at it as the academics are just one part of developing the whole child. Because if we consider it only a priority to work on academics, there's the saying, what is tested is what matters. That's what people collect data on, and then everybody needs to get positive data. And we've been in a world for a long time now where there's a lot of high stakes testing, and that translates into the students' grades, into the teachers' evaluations, sometimes into the teachers' pay, into the school grades. In some states like mine, schools are graded. And so all the energy starts going into getting strong academic test scores and having good academic tests and preparing the children how to take the test, et cetera, et cetera. And it starts to distort things away from that whole child philosophy. And then by the time the social emotional learning is brought up, like, hey, we've lost our attention to this, people think that it's another thing being put on their plate. Oh my God, now I have one more thing on my plate. I can't take one more thing. But what I want to point out is that the social emotional, even the physical, is the plate. That's the plate. If you don't have the social emotional development and stability, you can pour all those academics on and it's going to just,
holding it together
because there's nothing there to support it and hold it up.
Preach, Deborah, preach.
Emotional is people are starting to recognize, schools are starting to recognize. I'm proud to say my own school district now has a social emotional strategic department at the district level to look how to work on this.
I'm first of all, your passion so comes through and it's so infectious. And I really appreciate, I think somebody like you and I whose feet are on the ground and we are doing this work with people. And I know when we take it more at a aerial perspective on education, a lot of these issues get lost a little bit in the shuffle. But I love the way you emphasize that without the plate, there's nothing to serve. So let's not worry about what am I serving. You don't have a plate to hold anything.
What do you think about how we can promote the student success by focusing on the teacher's social and emotional competence?
Well, you already kind of emphatically emphasized that it begins with the teacher.
Yes.
And so I am seconding that. And, it's just SEL is as learnable, as a learnable skill. We talked about SEL as a teachable skill. So
Yes.
sometimes I feel that if you don't have your own emotions in check, how can you really support anybody else? And I think somehow more harder the child gets to manage, stricter or more difficult we become. We become inflexible or uncooperative. So I want to start.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby.
Have you seen this?
Oh, yeah, I love this.
Yes, I love
The
this.
baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay.
So one thing I wanted to point out about this video, and it's painful to watch that, honestly.
The mother, how she managed to keep herself that way.
I know. And so to me, this kind of captures the importance of emotional contagion, this power that our emotions have on other people. And people, children, students are able to read, get the vibes that you're sending. If you have an unaddressed hostility or untackled low-grade anxiety or depression, that's the emotional contagion. It's infectious, just like COVID-19 is. And I think it's really important that we create a protective layer so that the children are not influenced by our negative emotions. And I wanted to share some research here that, teachers' treatment of low achievers, research, this was done by Good in 1987, that they got less wait time. They are criticized more often for failure. They are praised less frequently. They receive less feedback. They're called on less often. They're seated further away from the teacher. They have less eye contact from the teacher. They have fewer friendly interactions with the teacher. And their ideas are less often accepted. This is what's happening to low achievers in the classroom. And guess what? Who are those low achievers? People you and I see, people with executive function problems and people having a social emotional breakdown. So there's a powerful truth in we playing an important role as an adult who is coaching and guiding and teaching, that our attitudes are infiltrating the way they are received by our students. So I just was framing this from that point of view, that what are some strategies to enhance teacher influence? And so I have 6 strategies I want to quickly go through before our time is up. But the first strategy is share your why. We all have gone into this profession to be with children because we deeply care about children. And I actually have a necklace that a client of mine gave, and that I actually generally keep it away, but I'm wearing that today so that I can show you all. But that's one of my ways of reminding myself what my why is. I also have, I got my first degree in India, and I had before I even went into a profession, I had a neighbor whose daughter had, she was called a blue baby, but she had actually an anoxic injury at the time of her birth, and she was considered slow. She didn't articulate well. She never received therapy or any such thing. But my mother asked me to tutor her, and it was kind of annoying. I was just in 9th grade, and I was like, oh my God, I have to do this. And once I started spending time with her, I realized how smart she was. She, in fact, was brilliant in math. Now she is, she is highly educated. She still has the speech impediment or her presentation. She has sluggishness. So she has some, tone issues. But she was the kind of child who people would have written her off, because she didn't present herself and this is, I'm talking about in India too, where we didn't have that kind of understanding of these invisible disabilities. So that's my why. And I always share with some of my difficult students why I have gotten into teaching. And I talk about Malika as my inspiration to get into this profession. Another thing I wanted to quickly share, this is a little bit devastating video, so brace yourselves.
Mother says she knows a teacher hurt her daughter was because her daughter told her, not the school. And she says she has video to prove what the teacher says happened was a lie.
I can't even really put it in words. I hurt for my child, and I was just angry that someone could do that.
This is February 21st, 2019, in the library at Blue Jacket Flint Elementary School in Shawnee. The little girl you see highlighted there is 5 years old. Her kindergarten class just finished up an artwork project in the library. But this little girl is growing frantic because she's worried she can't find her drawing or someone stepped on it. The story of what happens next is very different depending on who you ask. But the video is very clear. That little girl ends up on the ground, grabbed and then kicked by her teacher. That girl's mother...
Anyway, I'm sorry to present such a gory example. It's horrific. But I am thinking, so look at the beginning of this situation where the girl felt she lost or misplaced her drawing. So there's a sense of panic, there's a sense of fear, and there's a sense of help. Her method may have not been most effective to ask for help, but the teacher probably was frustrated, sounds like, that she must have cajoled and comforted her. It's going to be okay, we'll find it, but let's go back to the class. I'll make sure. And none of them may have worked. So you see her throwing a tantrum or hiding. But all I'm saying is, in that moment, I bet that teacher did not want to do that. This was just a reflex.
It's, again, we all have the same physiology that we've been talking about. And we're all vulnerable to be thrown into that reactive part of our nervous system where we just have a stress reaction, which is fight or flight. And this is where, when you're saying these strategies on this slide, how to work on your own area of self-calming, we're all primed. The less we pay attention to our own stress levels, the more we're primed to have one of these reactions. And Sucheta and I know neither of us were born the way we are, that people probably are listening and thinking we're tremendously calm and, you know, stable people. But we've been through stress, and part of the reason we are so passionate about this is that we know that by taking care of ourselves, it has made our lives better, and it has given us the energy that we can then bring to help others. It's multiplied it so much. You know, every hurricane has an eye, that calm space in the middle. And teachers, if you take care of yourself and don't accept the stress as normal and inescapable, but you develop a practice of breathing and centering yourself and make this as an important part of your day of taking care of yourself, you will make that, you will find the eye of your hurricane, whatever your hurricane may be.
I love that. I really love that. And I know if you allow me to go 5 minutes beyond our time, participants, thank you. And Deborah, thank you for your patience. But I think once you set the tone for yourself as to how are you going to handle your own emotional loss of sense of equilibrium, how can you enter the eye of the hurricane, so to speak? Once you come from there, then the next strategies will work. But they are a little bit more large picture strategies. So a name is everything. Have a personal relationship. Recognize that the student has a story, and that story is what's going to make you want to help that child. And I think we are running so busily and crazily that we don't have time to know each other's stories. So sharing a little bit about yourself, but making a priority to listen to others would be great. Meaning behind your name, what is your middle name, if there's any, is there a nickname? And what do you like about your name? And there's some kids who don't like their names. So if you could change your name, what would it be? But the idea there is the horn that we try to press to get people's attention is name. And if we don't engage through that name, the name says everything, right? Deborah, 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 right? So the tone is saying everything about who we are. And it's really important to take the time to develop that relationship. This is another 2x10 relationship guidelines, 2 minutes every day, 10 days in a row. Talk to the student about everything except schoolwork. Now, this also, again, going back to this plate analogy, it feels like a luxury. Teachers may say, I don't have time because I have curriculum to teach. But if you don't have the plate, what are you going to do? Couple more thoughts is cultivate practice of telling kids how beautiful they are, just the way they are. I really, really, really like this idea of full compassionate acceptance. And I don't think we have time, but this is a teacher who during a pandemic created a beautiful video. It's just showing cards, and she distributed to her students as soon as they went virtual. And that, she said, these were my kindergartners. I couldn't really go and hug them. This was my way of telling them how much I love them. So in summary, Deborah, thank you for being here with me. And I would like to summarize what you and I shared, if you're okay, or we can alternate. I'll say the first one, you say the next one. So first is, all learning is social and emotional, no doubt about it. Let's not argue about it. Let's not think learning is intellectual. Learning requires memory. Learning requires attention. No, learning requires feeling that I am fully present as a human being and I'm accepted for who I am. How about the second one?
Anchor children through personal relationships, that rapport that lets the children know that each individual knows that he or she is important to you as a teacher.
Beautiful. And SEL is teachable and learnable. You cannot be in charge of SEL without being in charge of your SEL.
Okay, your temperament is the key. A lot of our communication is nonverbal, and that includes the energy that comes from us. If we're projecting calm energy and we feel grounded, no matter what's going on in that hurricane, we can help be the wind beneath the students' wings, and we're less vulnerable to being hijacked by children who, in their immaturity, in their stress, are projecting their own helplessness and frustration.
Beautifully said. And last but not the least, thriving communities have compassionate leaders. And so the culture, I like to call it the executive function culture or SEL culture, that begins from the tiniest pre-kindergartner to the superintendent of the school. So with that, we would like to thank all of you for participating today. Thank you, dear Deborah, for being so wonderful, always being fabulous partner in crime and inspiring me every day. Thank you.
You too. Back at you. Okay.
All
Bye,
right.
everybody. We love you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
We love you.